Nobody told you that the rules changed. When you started saving in your 30s, the deal was simple. Work hard, put money in your 401k, own a house, stay the course, retire at 65 with enough to live on. Nobody sent a letter when that math stopped working. No advisor called, no bank flagged it. The brochure never got updated. You just kept following the plan, doing your part, trusting the system, while behind the scenes the country quietly ran up a bill that guarantees your dollars will be worth less every year that you hold them. That bill now sits at $39 trillion. That's what the United States owes, not in some distant projection, not in a worst case scenario, but right now, today. 8 years ago, that number was about half of what it is today. We doubled that entire national debt of the United States in less than a decade. If you're 50 and trying to figure out why your retirement math isn't working, well, that's the number that explains a lot. Your advisor won't bring it up, and the financial planning software won't model it, but it sits underneath every dollar that you've saved, quietly deciding what those dollars actually will be worth when you go to spend them. Hi, I'm J. Scott McMillan, and I spent years following the standard financial playbook, and then I looked up one day and I realized that the playbook was written for a country that no longer exists. If you're new here, I make these videos for people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who feel behind on retirement and know in their gut that the old advice just stopped working. Because it did. And I'm going to show you exactly why in plain English with real numbers. Okay, here's what you're going to learn in the next 10 or so minutes. Number one, the number the Congressional Budget Office publishes that tells you everything about where your dollars are headed. Two, what's actually happening to your purchasing power with data since 2019 that your advisor will never put on a chart for you. Three, why a growing list of the biggest institutions on earth, including Vanguard, are quietly pivoting into assets that the government can't print, and how you can too. Stay with me into the end. The last few minutes are where the shift really happens and the path forward starts making sense. The other important number beyond the $39 trillion is the one the Congressional Budget Office says is running at about 101% of GDP this year, and it's projected to climb to 120% by 2036. That's not a fringe analyst with a doom newsletter. That's the government's own forecasting office. When federal debt hits 101% of GDP, it means the US government owes more than the entire country produces in a year. For every dollar of economic output, there's $1.01 of federal debt outstanding. Now let that sit for a second. And nothing on the political horizon suggests that trend is going to reverse, because cutting spending costs elections, and raising taxes costs elections. And the one thing that both parties have in common is that they intend to keep getting elected. So the path is the path. By the time the current administration leaves office in January 2029, the debt will likely be sitting somewhere between 46 trillion and 50 trillion. Okay, nothing cataclysmic has to happen for that to be true. No new wars, no new pandemic, no bailout. That is simply the math of where we already are, extended straightforward in a straight line. Now here's the part that the official story leaves out. When the deficits are this large and the interest bill is this heavy, the system develops a quiet preference for letting those dollars lose their value over time. It's the only way that the math works. If your dollars are slowly worth less every year, that existing debt becomes easier to carry, which means politicians can keep spending and the central bank can keep printing money out of thin air to keep this whole machine going. And everybody at the top gets what they need. The cost of that arrangement gets paid by anyone who stores their wealth in dollars and dollar-denominated assets. Now, this isn't theory. Just look at the data since 2019. Over the last 6 years, gross federal debt went up by 65.7%. The total U.S. money supply, or the M2, is up 45.9%. But real weekly earnings, the actual purchasing power of your paycheck, well, that's just up 3.9%. You worked hard, you saved, you did the things that you were told to do, and the value of what you saved was quietly being diluted in a system that you really never voted for. So here's what your safe retirement plan is actually up against. A system in Washington that can only pay its bills by letting your dollars slowly lose value. Inflation that hasn't gone away no matter what the headlines say. And a Federal Reserve that's trapped between fighting for the budget and fighting for your purchasing power. The retirement playbook that you were handed assumed a world where inflation was 2%, debt was manageable, and the dollar was a safe place to store decades of work. Save 10% of your income, put it in an index fund or some bonds, retire at 65, live on 4% withdrawals. That advice wasn't malicious, it was just built for a different country. The country we actually live in has a $39 trillion debt load that's compounding faster than the economy can grow. It has interest payments competing with every other priority in the federal budget. It has a Fed that's politically and financially trapped. And it has a measurement problem where official inflation numbers consistently understate what you experience at the grocery store, at the doctor's office, and your insurance renewal. Inside that environment, the old advice doesn't just underperform, it mathematically can't work. If your portfolio is returning 6 to 7% after fees and the actual erosion of your purchasing power is running closer to that, you're not building wealth. You're running on a treadmill that's tilted slightly downhill. Now, this is the part nobody tells you when you're 35. By the time you're 55 and you can finally see it clearly, you feel like you must have done something wrong. But you didn't. The rules changed and nobody updated the brochure. The conversation about risk in personal finance is just upside down. You've been trained to think of volatility as the danger. The S&P dropped 20%, well, that's scary. A 50% drawdown is something terrifying. So you're told to stay in safe assets, cash, bonds, conservative allocations. But there's a different kind of risk that doesn't show up on a chart. It's the risk that the measuring stick itself shrinks. The risk that you get to retirement on schedule with the number that you were told to hit, only to find out that that number doesn't buy what it used to. That's the risk of the $39 trillion debt load is quietly creating for everyone who plays it safe. Now, this erosion in purchasing power that you don't really see is what's gutting most retirement plans right now. The honest question for anyone in their 40s, 50s, and 60s isn't, how do I avoid risk? It's, which risk do I want? And which one am I prepared to manage? Because doing nothing is a choice. And in this environment, it's a remarkably expensive one. If the system needs dollars to slowly lose value to survive, then storing your future in dollars is the one thing that the math says you can't afford to do indefinitely. Now, some of your wealth has to live somewhere that politicians can't quietly tax through the back door. Now, that's why a growing number of institutions, including BlackRock, Fidelity, and Vanguard, that company that's spent decades telling you to buy index funds, well, they're now offering exposure to assets like Bitcoin with a fixed supply. Because nobody, not even Congress, not the Fed, not the Treasury, gets to issue more Bitcoin with a press release. The supply is the supply. It's 21 million and that's it. This isn't a pitch to bet the farm. It's a reframe of what conservative actually means in a country with $39 trillion in debt, an interest bill that's about to double. Conservative used to mean cash and bonds. Now, in this environment, conservative might mean owning at least some of your future in something like Bitcoin, where the political system can't dilute it. You don't have to figure this out today. You just have to stop pretending the old definition still applies. The United States is carrying $39 trillion in debt. The deficit nearly tripled in 8 years. The interest bill alone is approaching $1 trillion a year and is on track to double in the next decade. The Fed is trapped between fighting inflation and protecting the federal budget, and savers are the ones absorbing that cost. This is not a forecast. It's a description of where we already are. If you're behind on your retirement and stuck in the standard playbook, you're not behind because you made bad decisions. You're behind because the rules changed and the people writing the rules have no incentive to send you the memo. The math on traditional savings vehicles assumed a stable currency with disciplined spending. We have neither. The first move isn't to just panic, it's to see clearly. And once you understand what that $39 trillion number actually is doing to the value of every dollar that you save, the conversation about where to put your money next finally starts making sense. You weren't given the full picture, but now you have it. If this video hits something for you, go ahead and subscribe and pass it along to someone in their 50s who quietly is worried about their retirement number. The math is brutal, but the path forward is clearer than you think. We'll keep walking it together. And actually, I'm holding a 90-minute masterclass to cover everything I've just talked about and how to actually invest in catch-up assets so you don't have to worry about your retirement anymore. Grab your seat. The link is in the description. I'm Jay Scott, and I'll see you next week.